Hi, this is Elaine Benfield, and welcome to Herstories. I'm super excited today. I have a fabulous guest. Amanda Kernahan is on. I'm trying not to butcher her name, but is on joining me, and I want to welcome Amanda to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, as you know, Amanda, when I start off her stories, I really talk about why someone inspires me. So, we met recently, and the minute I saw who you are, what your life journey has, and how you've turned grief into something, as positive as you can, you've inspired me. I love your blogs, I love your business, and I think you have so much to share to the world. I think grief is something a lot of people don't talk about. We all go through it, and so I get emotional, but I feel there's something about you. You're super inspiring, and I'm so thankful to get to know you and really have you tell your story and other people to hear from you. So thank you for inspiring me and being on Her Stories today.
Oh, I so appreciate it. We met recently, like you said, and I felt that connection with you, and I think we're gonna have a great conversation.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and start. Who's Amanda? Tell everyone who you are and give a little background about yourself.
So I think that's a loaded question, and I think it changes day to day. Currently, I am a writer. I'm a podcaster. My podcast is called Grief Trails. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a small business online called RememberGrams. During the day, I do have a day job. I'm a sign language interpreter at a hospital, and I work with deaf doctors and medical professionals. And I'm also a mom. I have two kids. I have a husband, a big, huge German Shepherd, and I am an avid hiker and outdoors person. Nature is really important to me. And so, yeah, that's like the best I can summarize it at this moment in time.
No, that's a great summary and a sneak preview of who you are. So let's start off with kind of a hard, topic of, so when you were young in your 20s, you lost your mother suddenly. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my mom and I were super close, and I know so many people say that, my mom is my best friend, and it just really is the truth. We spoke every single day. I lived about 4 hours away from her at the time that she died. If I rewind, when I was a child, I grew up, I'm one of four siblings, so I have an older brother and two younger brothers, and there's a pretty big age gap in between us. So my older brother's 3 years older than me, but then after me, my next youngest brothers are 8 and 10 years younger. So it was sort of the two of us, my older brother and I growing up, and then my two younger brothers. And so we were out of the house while they were growing up. And so I moved off to college, and my mom and I were very close because my older brother struggled a lot with addiction and had a lot of issues. And so we talked all the time about him, maybe a little bit codependent, talking about, what we could do and how to help him and the latest updates. And so I would say we spoke at least once a day, maybe more than that. And I was living about 4 hours from her. And my daughter, I had a 2 year old daughter at the time, and I was newly married. I was married for about a year. And my daughter had just turned 2 the weekend before. My mom had come out with my dad and with other family members to visit. And my youngest brother, who was 15 at the time, wanted to stay for the week. And my older brother was living in the same city as me. And so I said, sure, you can stay with me for the week. And so our other brother, who was 18, decided he would come out the following weekend to drive my youngest brother home. And we would have like a birthday celebration for me. I was turning 26. And so we were going to go to a Renaissance festival. And it was the first time that all four of us, me and my siblings, were all under one roof for probably a decade. It was all of us together. It was the first time we were doing something without our parents, without the rest of the family. And the morning of the Renaissance Festival, I woke up to my phone ringing, and it was a phone call from my grandmother. And she told us that my mom had died. And it was a heart attack. It was completely unexpected. My mom was 47. She was healthy. She was petite and vibrant, and it really shattered everything for us. It changed the trajectory of all of our lives.
And I'm sure you have the same as I do with my father. I remember the words. I remember that ring of the phone call. I remember there's certain things that you can't forget. They're embedded because your life changed from that specific moment. And
Mhm.
when you so how do you have a 2-year old you've got your siblings, you're one of the older siblings. So how do you're like, I have to now go 4 hours away, be with with your dad. Like, how do you, because to me, it's shock. It's complete shock.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me more about what you remember.
Oh, I was absolutely in shock. I was in denial also. And I do remember the words. It's funny you say that. I think probably everyone has that experience, but it was my grandmother calling me, and I thought it's so weird that my grandmother is calling me so early on a Saturday morning. And when she had left me a voicemail that said, "Your mom had a heart attack and it's really bad. Call me." And I was freaking out. And while the phone was dialing to call her, and when she picked up, I could tell she was crying. So I knew almost before I knew. And then she said, "Baby, she died." And it like shattered me. And I still get emotional thinking about that. It was like I know where I was standing in my house, and I know that my brothers heard me scream or make a noise. So they all came running, and I had to tell all of my brothers that their mom had died. And when I got off the phone with my grandmother, I had told my husband and said, "We need to pack up." When I was on the phone, also, I kept saying, "Has anyone really checked?" I didn't believe it. My brain could not. Yeah. So I thought somebody was wrong and she was unconscious, but she was going to be fine. I wanted to go to like the hospital, but it was too late for all of that.
Especially
Um,
you're 4 hours away, so you're helpless by the time you get there anyway. Like
right,
that's also part of it. The guilt of I'm not right there.
right.
Yeah.
And I called my dad. That was like my first instinct was I got to call my dad. My parents were divorced at this point, but they were still close friends. And I called him and he picked up and I just started bawling. And I just said, "What happened?" And he said, "What? What happened?" And I was like, "Oh my God, he doesn't know." And so then I had to tell him, and I just felt like this bearer of the worst news in the world. And I had to tell all the people I love the most about the person they love who died. And it was awful. And so, yeah, we took a 4 hour drive. We had two cars because it was so many of us at this point all out here. And my 2 year old, interestingly, was so quiet. I mean, there was not a word, there was no sound in our car when we were driving. It was just silence
I
and
read your
crying.
blog about it and you were saying like I didn't want music. I didn't want like you had to be in that moment.
Hmm.
I so you and I talk like my father had emergency heart surgery and I was 29, similar. And I
Hmm.
remember I drove from Boston to Allentown, Pennsylvania, complete silence. And
Yeah.
I remember that I could not hear a song. I didn't want to hear it. I had to hear it myself and quickly get home 5 hours to be with him. And so he survived a few years after that, but I know that it's almost deafening, but you need silence. It's I don't know why when I read that, I was like, oh, I had the same experience.
Yeah. And my 2 year old sensed it. She didn't
Yeah.
make a peep the whole ride home. And that's a long ride for a 2 year
For a
old.
2 year old. So how do you're then a lot of the cornerstone, you're really the mom role model then, because without your mom being there, did you instantly just get that motherly instinct to protect your brothers and your sibling? Like, how is that? Because you had to become you're not just a sister anymore. You're taking to help your mom's legacy. How do you remember that? Did you feel you had to do that?
I absolutely felt like I had to do that. Did I do it smoothly? No. I think
You were
I
young. You
was,
were young.
right. I think I was a little resentful of having to bear the weight of my own grief, but also feeling like I was
Mhm.
responsible for taking care of everyone else also.
Yeah.
And I knew that I couldn't do a good job at it because I was so heartbroken. And
Yeah.
I was in a really bad place for probably a year. I mean, I struggled really bad. And so part of me did blame myself because I was not super attentive to my family. My brothers, my older brother, like I mentioned, he previously had addiction issues, and our mother's death put him right back to where he had been and worse. And he immediately relapsed. There was nothing I could even attempt to do in that situation. And then our youngest brother, who is 15, started slipping into addiction and we didn't notice because I think every one of us were so we were just in this bubble of our own grief and our own sadness, and I just couldn't, and he was 4 hours away from me, but I just couldn't reach out to him and give him the focus I wish I had been able to at the time. And yeah, it started a really difficult time for him.
Spiral. And it's hard. You didn't have loss before that, right? You
No.
didn't, and that's what I think is so hard. In life this happens, but when it happens so immediate, and I don't, grief is grief, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Yes, of course, when people have cancer, there could be a longer time when people, but when it's instant like that,
Mhm.
it's so different because you had no preparation. And I think that does change, in my opinion, like a little bit of the narrative, that the loss is so profound because you're from one day to the next, your whole life changed. And I'm sure you felt the same.
Oh yeah, I mean, I felt like I fell off of the planet I was on and onto a new one that I didn't recognize and had to navigate my way there.
So you end up surviving the best you could, and then you had another loss. Can you talk about that? And how many years between the loss of your mom?
So I will say, like I mentioned, I had probably a good year where I was really, really struggling. And I mean, to the point my marriage almost ended. Things were really bad in every aspect of my life. And my brother, who is the next youngest to me, who's 8 years younger, had said to me one day, hey, my girlfriend and we're going on these hikes in the Adirondacks, which are near where my dad lives and where he lives. And so he asked my husband and I to join him. And I did not exercise at the time. I didn't hike. I was the furthest that you could think from that, but I had nothing to lose because I was miserable anyway. And so I was like, sure, I'll go on this hike with you. And it changed everything for me. There was something about being in nature, about walking for 12 hours, about challenging my body in ways that had never been challenged and getting these rewards of like views and the fresh air. It was just this mixture of all of that that really helped me and I knew it immediately. And um so my husband and I started to do these hikes. That's really how I think we healed our marriage. We committed to doing, there are 46 mountains. We committed to doing them all. And
That's
it took us,
amazing.
so it
That's
ended up taking us 10 years. But in this time, like I said, my youngest brother was struggling. He had been 15 when our mom died. He was really close with our mom. He was her baby. And he did not want to process his grief at all. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to face it. It was really bad. And so I did, in the years that I was hiking, try to bring him with me a couple times. And he came on these amazing hikes with us. And I have just such fond memories of seeing him go up and down the mountain and giggling and enjoying himself. And I had such high hopes that that was going to be the thing that like
because it
sealed
helped
the deal.
you, and maybe
Yeah.
it was going to be able to help him.
Right. So I just wanted this like magical healing to happen for him and it didn't and he really struggled and this was years. And so I would say it was about 7 years after my mom died that I saw my youngest brother one day. Him and my dad came to visit and we went to like a little festival near my house and he was so bad. The minute I saw him get out of the car, I thought he's so unwell. He's very sick. And I thought I'm never going to see him alive again. And when they left, it was like traumatic. There was like drama that happened, and he was clearly using at the time. And
And you
I
knew when
thought,
you saw him that you were like, because there is a look, unfortunately, you do see someone and you're like, if you know they have addiction, they change.
mhm,
They just do. And it's hard to explain to someone. But if you know
right.
anyone that has addiction, you can see it in their face. They just change. And so you knew at that moment, did you say anything to him to be like, I really want to, like, you need to get help? Or, how do how do you
So
do that at that moment?
So this was after I mean, we'd been trying for years and we
Yes.
had had a family intervention, I think the spring before this happened. And I had said to him at that time, like, I just don't want you to die. Like, I love you. And he heard it. And, he was trying his best, but he wasn't going to a program at that time. So he left Rochester. after all of this drama happened that weekend, and I thought, this is it. And then he went missing. And so my dad called me and said, I don't know where he is. I can't get in touch with him. And so again, I was like, this is it. This is what's going to happen. And I was scrolling social media one day, and on Facebook, I saw a person who is from the area I'm from who posted a police report or a news story saying, help, like we need your help capturing this person who just robbed a bank. And it was a photo of my younger brother. And you would never know because it was a blurry, like,
Yeah, those
security
police photos.
camera.
Yeah, security camera, like kind of dodgy. Yeah. Oh,
Right. And I knew it was him, and it crushed me. And I just thought, Jesus. And then he wasn't caught right away. And I thought he's going to be found dead because this money is feeding his addiction. And it took a couple days, and he was actually arrested, which for my dad and I was like a little bit of a sigh of relief because he wasn't dead.
yeah.
And he went to jail, and I visited him there. And he was so fortunate that the judge sentenced him to a long-term rehab program. He went through the drug court system, which was a huge blessing. And we had tried, as an aside, as a family to get him into long-term rehab for a long time, and insurance puts up every barrier, and the most you can get approved is 28 days. And often that's only if you need detox, and it's just not sufficient.
No, no.
It doesn't lead to change. And so we were like, okay, long-term rehab. And so he went there, and he became the person that we knew years ago. I mean, he started reading. He was very into inner peace, and he was reading all of these philosophy and peace books. And we talked about reading a lot, and he was committed to making changes and being sober. And it was the first time he really committed to his sobriety, I think, since he began this journey when our mom died. And he actually wrote to me about how he was going through grief groups and talking about our mom's death, which is huge for him.
Yeah.
And so he was released from there in like June. And then that summer we did family reunions, and we did camping trips, and we spent as much time together as we could. And there was a weekend that I arranged for my family to come to a cabin in the Adirondacks with us, like the mountains near us. And I invited him, and he said he had to work. He had a new job. He was making really good money. He was really proud of himself. And so he didn't join us. And that weekend, we couldn't get a hold of him. And it's always terrifying. But he had also been sober for a good time.
But your first thought, I'm sure, and instinct is, oh no.
Right.
Oh no.
Right.
Because you've lived through the pattern.
Yeah. So I was terrified, and I hugged my dad goodbye when I left the cabin that weekend and said, just let me know. Like, as soon as you hear something, let me know. And I was at work the next day, and my dad called me, and I knew, like, immediately. So,
Well, and it's so hard because I can only imagine that, families can only do so much. And I am such a strong believer and mental health leads to all these challenges, and grief can take the life of people don't know how to get out of it.
right.
And I feel like that spiral of, your family did everything you could, and addiction is it's part of mental illness. It's people
Right.
don't want to do it. They just don't know how to get out. So how do you pick yourself up from that moment where you're like, I've just lost two of my family members that meant the world to me? And you have, at that time, do you have one or two children? Do you have your second?
I had two children at the time, yeah.
So
And I will just say, my youngest son, my son, so I have a daughter and a son, and my son adored my brother. I mean, just followed him around like a shadow, constantly wanted to be near him.
How old was he when your brother died?
He was 4, I believe, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just having to tell my kids, it was horrific.
Yeah. Because you want to shield your kids from that stuff. You just do. So how do you pick yourself up? Were you just once again going, oh my God, I'm going to spiral and how do you do that in the moment?
I was really afraid I was going to spiral. I was really afraid that I was going to go back to the place I went after my mom died. And that terrified me. And so I found a therapist within a week of him dying and thought, I need to go to therapy right now. And I kind of thought maybe it would help me avoid grieving. Like if you could just be proactive, you could just avoid all the messy parts. it didn't quite work out that way, but I did start seeing a therapist very quickly and committed to doing that. And I also, for me, I think I learned a lot through my mother's loss that exercise, the outdoors, nature were really, really crucial for me. And so we made a point. I went on a couple hikes. I had friends who would say, we need to go on a run. And I'd be like, I don't want to. I'm too sad. I don't want to do anything. And they'd say, no, like you need to come and we'll walk if we need to, but you're going to come and be outside and do this.
And it's, it's in, to me, therapy, I remember it was so negative when I grew up. Like, oh, only really damaged people went to therapy. And I never went to therapy until I started last August and was like, oh my God, it is so good to have someone who's in your corner who just wants you to tell them what's going on to help you navigate it. And at
Mhm.
times I was embarrassed. And then I'm like, why am I embarrassed? I can't help myself and others unless I get the help I need to grieve and to get through. And because sometimes you don't see the end of
Right.
like, you can't see the end of the tunnel. You just can't. And I'm sure therapy for you probably felt the same, that it's like, oh, every time I leave therapy, I'm like, I have a little weight less off my shoulders. Cause I try to take everything on, as I'm sure you feel the same, that, you know, you have to hold the whole burden of all this.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
therapy was really helpful. And just knowing that I could reach for all of the tools that were there for me and giving myself permission to like have the bad days
Mhm.
and also permission to have the good days, and knowing that both of those were perfectly normal.
And I love that your friends, I have friends like that too, that were just knew when I said, I don't want to talk to anyone. They're like, nope, we're going to talk right now. I even had a girlfriend who I said, no, 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 I'm fine. And she lives in Austin. And she was like, I'm coming. And I was like, no, 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 I'm good. And the minute she came, I was like, oh, I didn't realize how much I needed you. And it's those friends that really push forward. Some people don't know, we've talked, like some people don't know how to handle grief for someone else. I think that's also hard for people to be. I don't know if they see themselves in it, but we all go through it, whatever scenario. So, how do you then take this grief and then turn it into your world now? Like, how did you go from, it's always an evolution, because I do
Mhm.
feel like there's moments where you're like, I'm sure you miss your mom every day and there's something that'll trigger you, but the tears become, you know, parts where you're like, oh, I remember when she did that, or I remember that moment. How do you get from, those years to get to where you're like, I need to turn this into something more meaningful?
It was a slow progression. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years from the time my brother died before I started anything that I'm doing
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah.
And it happened because I was going through my home office and I'm very sentimental. I keep everything. And so I definitely have boxes of sympathy cards, some from when my mom died, some from when my brother died. And I just came upon them and started looking at them and thought, they all say the same thing, they all look the same way. And I thought that was so depressing because to me, I knew the thing that I really wanted were I would have loved someone to show me a picture I'd never seen of my mom, or tell me a story about my brother, some experience you had with him, however trivial. It fills something for me, gives me back a piece of them that I had lost. And so I just looked at these cards and thought, why is no one doing this better?
Yeah.
We're in the,
It's generic
we're
Hallmark. It means nothing. It's like the same.
right,
Totally agree with you. I felt this exact same thing. Yeah.
right. And, it's just like somebody went to the grocery and like, not to say that it's not kind of people to like pick you out a card, but I just thought this could be done better. And so
Mhm.
that's when I had the idea for RememberGrams, and my dad was by my side the whole way and said, "Absolutely, let's do it. This is a great idea." My husband thought it was a good idea, which was a great go ahead for me because I've had a lot of business ideas over the years, and often he's like, "I don't know if that one's going to work
The
out."
honest actor.
Yeah. So I wanted to be able to create a place where people could upload a photo and we could make a personalized card to send to the family who's grieving. or we could make it around a theme, around something that that person loved, some memory you have of that person. And I try to encourage people when they're writing their message for the card to include some kind of a memory or something personal that will have that extra special impact on the person getting it. And so that's what I did. A lot of, there are websites where you can have cards made with photos, but not in a quantity of one.
Yeah.
And so that's what I wanted was I will make you one card just for this and have it sent to the person. And
Tailored and personalized. Like that's what I
Mhm.
think is because I also agree with you. I don't discredit like, hey, when you get a card, it still makes you happy and whatnot. But to have those memories, because I had a lot of people email me and I'm like, I'd much rather have had it in a card or something that I can put in a scrapbook or something to keep those memories alive. So I
Mhm.
love that it's so personal because that's what your anyone's relationship with someone is so personal and unique, but to have that for you to go, oh, I didn't know that, or a story
Right.
that's new or a memory because they experienced it with your loved one. So I
Right.
love that.
And that's the response that we've had is that the people, I think the most challenging part is getting the word out about it. It's such a new concept. People don't really understand. And I think
Mm-hmm.
some people feel weird, like, oh, I don't know if they'll like this, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It feels too personal almost for some people. I think that
Mm-hmm.
distance of buying a generic card sometimes feels comfy, right? Like, this is what we do. And so I can check a box and I did it. But for those who have gone that extra step and had a personal card made and had it sent to them, comes in this little gift box. The people who've received them inevitably reach back out and say, this is the best card I've ever received. And like, I'm going to save this. And people had, like, a friend of mine, she said her mom, sent her mom a card because her dog had passed away. And her mom brought the card on vacation so she could show it to her because it meant so much. And for people who've lost someone, we did a whole series for someone who had worked at this construction company for like 40 years, and so he had 5 children. We made 5 different cards, all surrounding this theme of construction. And they were so special. The family was like blown away. And it's just something different. And so, yeah, so it means a lot to me. I'm certainly not so successful that I'm making lots of money at this. But I really, really love doing it. So that's the most important part for me.
Well, and you can tell you love it, but it's going to catch on because I think all of us, as we get older, more people are having loss. And especially
Mhm.
like, we talked about it. I lost my dog and 13 years of a companion. And now I'm starting to have everyone else that has dogs that are 13 years old. We're all like, oh man, we're all hitting the same mark. And our parents are older, or a lot of my friends' parents are at that turning point as well. So did you ever, I mean, I love this business. I want to get back to it in a minute. Do you ever just think life's unfair? Do you see your friends? Okay, so your smile says it all because there's some friends that I'm like, oh, their parents, are fabulous in helping raise their kids and traveling all around the world. I'm like, yeah, I lost my dad when he was 71. And I don't want to discredit because your mom was younger, but it's still nonetheless, I'm like, there's days where I'm like, life is sometimes just not fair.
Mhm.
And does your business help you to go, you know what? I'm helping someone else who's going through despair, and how do you, because it's tying it together going, we all go through it, as we keep, I keep saying, but are there days where you're like, crap, why I got the wrong end of this, you know?
I think much less now than
Yeah.
when my grief was more fresh. And maybe that is because I do this. And, I am seeing loss all the time through my business, through my podcast. I'm hearing stories about loss all the time. And so I think I, now I can sort of look at the world and say the world is unfair. And life in general is unfair to a lot of people. And it's all just whatever cards were dealt. But I mean, there have been, when my mom died, especially, I had a really hard time with that. I mean, I was in my 20s. No one around me had lost a parent. No one understood why I was still grieving a month later. They were just like, why are we not back to partying and like our regular life? And so it was really hard for me to see other older women at the grocery store or people who don't take care of themselves who are smoking, and to say like, well, that's not fair. My mom was healthy and she was young and she
So,
had plans, but yeah, it's
yeah,
just
it's definitely, I've learned to try not to do that as much, but it still makes me angry. I can't not look at someone and go, their father's not a nice person. It's like, why is my dad not here? Like they have exchanged relationships. And I'm like, it is so hard to do that. not to do that.
Yeah.
So, when you started your business, did you let your kids know? Like, talk to me about how, I guess let me step back. How do you talk about your mom and your brother? Like, how do you incorporate them into your life? Do you bring up memories? How do you keep their memory alive for your children?
We talk, I think my kids are very familiar with my mom, even though they've never, my daughter met her, but doesn't remember her.
Yeah.
And my son obviously never got to meet her, but she's a huge part of me. And so
Mhm.
I do talk about her a lot. And I have her paintings. She was an artist. And so her paintings are all over our walls. And, people in our family are still very open about talking about memories of her and how funny she was and telling jokes that she played on people. So I think she's very much a part of them in that way. And then more so, my younger brother, because they did have a relationship with him and they did know him, that it has, he has remained very much a part of us. And every year, we actually just this past weekend, we did a race. We do a 5K in his memory, and it's for an organization that promotes recovery through fitness. And it was an organization that I really wanted him to have a chance to be a part of because I think they're doing amazing things. And I'm seeing people really turn their lives around through their, like the community that they build there. So we do that together as a family. My kids ran it this weekend with me. And, at Christmas, we always have my uncle will always give me a gift that is to my mom, and I will give him a gift from my mom because they used to have this like special funny relationship. So they're always like funny gifts. And then there's always something under the tree for my brother from somebody else. So we have like these traditions that we do that always incorporate them.
I did the same. And Hannah was 1 year old, almost one when my dad died. And I was 20 weeks pregnant with Alexander. So, like, Madeline, my stepdaughter, actually knew my dad up until like the age of 5. And I feel like she had the great opportunity to know him and she remembers him a little, but 5 is still young. But I celebrate the birthdays. I celebrate like every year. It's like Papa Joe's birthday, May 1st. And I feel my youngest son really looks like my dad. So and I think at this point, he's like, stop telling me I look like Papa Joe. And I'm like, but your eyes and I posted a picture recently. He's graduating this year from high school. And one of my dad's friend's daughter said, oh my God, it's your dad. And I said, oh, I know. Alexander's like, I've heard enough. But do you look at your kids and see a little bit of like, you said your mom is humor. And do you see that in your children too? Because I love that the legacy of both now my parents, no matter what, they have some of my parents in them. And does that help you sometimes when you see your kids? Do you see a little bit of your mom in them?
For sure, especially my daughter. She's very headstrong and stubborn and like never wants to believe that she could be wrong about something, which drives me crazy because I am much more a people pleaser and I just don't have that strong-willed personality, but my mother sure did, and I remember it very clearly. And so when I see my daughter being the same way, it is a little bit of solace to know that she probably got that from my side. And
From your mom and who's watching
yeah,
going, oh yeah, that's me, all
yeah.
right. So talk to me more about, so you have your business. How do you do that with, as you said, your full-time job? You write a lot of your articles and blogs are amazing. You have a podcast. You and I are very similar, kindred spirits. How do you do all of it? Because that's a question I get, and I feel like you even have more because you have a business that you're running as well. How do you do it all?
I don't know. I
That's a great answer.
I am scheduled very tightly. I'm busy. I try to take advantage of, all the time that I have so I can pursue so many different things. And mostly though, I'll say I follow whatever I feel like I'm being led towards. And it sounds so woo-woo and abstract, but it really is how everything has happened. So I decided to do this website and then I like went forward and did that. And then I started the blog because my dad was like, oh, you'll get more traffic to the website if you have a blog or something. So I started writing. And then I was like, oh my God, I love this writing. It's like so
It's so
cathartic. And
yeah, totally
yeah.
cathartic. Yeah.
And then I was like, and then I saw an ad for a memoir course and I was like, I want to take that course. That would be amazing. And so then I signed up for that and started working on a memoir, which now is finalized, and I'm just now going to be starting to look for agents. But in the meantime, the podcast idea came up, and I was like, wow, I'd love to connect with more people and hear their stories and give them space to share their own experience. And so then I learned how to do a podcast, and so now I'm just doing all of that, and I still have my full-time job, which uh yeah, it's a lot. And my kids are in sports, and you just make it work because I mean, for me, I'm definitely not doing this all of the things I'm doing aren't making me very much money. But I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it because I really, really feel passionate about it. I really feel like this is what my heart and my soul are meant to be doing. And so it makes me feel good doing it. And so that's where I'm led, and that's where I'm going with it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's amazing. And I think that's what, I think from your life, if you find these lessons to create something that is meaningful to you, it means more like, her stories to me is labor of love. Am I making money? Absolutely not. But
right.
in the end, it makes me happy. And I
Mhm.
feel even you talking about it, because, I said you're really turning grief into something positive to help others, and I think that's so important and that's fulfills you, you know?
Right. And one of the things that was like the catalyst to, or the idea behind my podcast, was to show people that so many people have a really sad story, but then at the end of it, like their life changed, and that in its own way it can be sad, but oftentimes they're so much happier or more fulfilled, and they've created something new from that loss that they wouldn't have prior. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And so I've done that with myself, and I love to hear how other people have done it, and you have done it. And so I just think it's a wonderful thing to show people who maybe are in those beginning stages and feeling completely destroyed and despair and
Mhm.
feel like their life is over, but it's not.
It's not, and it can be better. It's not the same, but it's
Right.
different. And there is you will smile again. I don't cry quite as much when I talk about my parents because now I
Hmm.
have happy memories. The void is the same. And I'm sure you
Right.
feel the same. The loss of your brother and your mom, nothing will ever change that. But you can turn that sadness into now I kind of laugh at these stories that are in my mind. And my sister and I always talk about, like, remember the time? And it's like those moments that I have with her talking about her parents mean the world to me. We're
Mhm.
trying to write that stuff down because we're like, as we get older, we're like, we want our kids to know these stories that we've said, but they pay attention kind of. So what do you think what do you hope people can learn from you, from what you've gone through and everything else?
I think what people can learn, is that life isn't over, even when it feels like it is. You're still here, and that means that there is something ahead for you. And the second thing is that you should follow whatever little spark you're feeling and see where it brings you, and then follow the next one and see where that takes you. And you won't end up where you think you're going, or where you are kind of setting out to go, and you may take a different course. But I think that's really what we're meant to be doing, and it's scary, and it requires a lot of courage. And but if you've just lost someone in your life, or had this experience that has changed your life completely, then that is way more scary than you following something that you feel called to do. And I just encourage people to try new things.
Yeah, I love that. And I couldn't agree with you more. There's one other question which I wanted to ask you, and I think you said this in one of your blogs. I never believed in signs until you know where I'm going with this, until my father passed away, and everyone always talks about cardinals. So for years after my dad passed away, I always saw one cardinal. The day after my mom died, I now see two. And I'm not that person, but I'm like, I don't know, circling around. And then the other after my dog died, I saw three, and I'm like, okay, there's something there. And I think you talked about it. I remember the anniversary of my dad's death one year. One of my cousins said, "Oh, I found this photo of your dad," and I was like, never saw it before. And then another year, I found a painting he did, and he also loved doing artwork. And I kept like, it's so bizarre. Out of every day, I'm not searching for it, but it does show up on these their birthday, the anniversary of their passing. Do you believe in that too? Is it like, because sometimes I feel like I'm crazy going, and then I talk to my sister on the phone, two cardinals almost every single time. And I'm like, So do you have those moments, and tell a little bit about that? Because I loved hearing, reading
Yeah.
about some of your things.
Yeah, I originally, when my mom died, expected that there would be signs everywhere. Like she would be there haunting me. She very much believed in like an afterlife and your
Hmm.
souls, and she went to mediums and all of this, all of that stuff. And I was a little on the fence always, but when she died, I was like, okay, well, if it's real, she will figure out how to get through to me because it's her. And I didn't get anything for a really long time. And it made me really resentful and mad because I had people in my life, like my dad or other people, her brother, who would say, oh, she comes to me in dreams and all of this. And I was just like, not me. And that, I think I was a little closed off to it because I wanted it so bad. But a couple things happened. Definitely, I had an experience right after she died with my daughter, which to me was really profound. Um, but the number one thing that happened actually was after my brother had died. It was the anniversary of my mom's death, and I think this is probably what you read about. And my younger brother and we decided we were going to have a call and do a toast to our mom because it was the day she had died, and he was on vacation with his wife, and so he put his kids to bed, and then we called and talked about our mom and said a little toast, and we hung up. And then he immediately texted me, like within 5 minutes, and said, "You will never believe what just happened." And he had packed a deck of playing cards into his suitcase for his wife and for them to play after the kids went to bed. And so when they got off the phone with us, they pulled this deck of cards out from their luggage and dumped it onto the table. And on the coffee table in that deck of cards was my younger brother's school ID from the year my mom died. And that's the brother who has died. And it was just so
Combination.
wild that it had something to do with both of them. It was the year she had died. And the fact that my brother had never opened this deck of cards since before our youngest brother had died, and the fact that he opened it on the anniversary, and the whole thing was really wild, and that really cemented it for me. I was like, okay, yeah, like that was
It's amazing. And some people are like, oh, you force it to happen. I'm like, no, you can't force that specific scenario after, celebrating, I mean, it's, I find it amazing. And I think there is solace in, believing in that and having that little bit, because I right away had dreams, both my parents, like vivid. And my sister always says, oh, I don't dream like you do. And I'm like, but you have to be open to it and
Mhm.
just let them, no matter what, there's certain things that, however that is a paper. I found, after my mom passed away, I found similar close to her anniversary of her passing, a piece of paper with something she wrote. It was like an errand list for me. And I'm like, never saw it before in my life, but it was for me around the time. And I'm like, she's saying, yeah, if she was here, she'd still give me to-do lists. Like, but it made me feel it's like, oh, there is some connection. So I love that story because I feel we all have that. And it's like, it makes you smile, it makes you cry, but it makes you go, they're around somehow. I don't know what it is. And I'm not religious, but there is something.
I
So
know. I'm the same way. And I always wish there would be more.
I know.
If I could make it happen, like I would have stuff every day, but it's just not, it just is a surprise every once in a while. And, I have a handful of things I can point to that have happened, and they're all very special to me.
Oh, I love hearing that. So I could talk to you forever, and I feel you're so inspiring to me and just helping me come to terms with, my grief and loss, that you've turned this into such an amazing, amazing thing. And I'm super excited to help promote, your business, but also help people find a way to help themselves or help others
Mhm.
that do go through the grieving process. And I'd love to talk about your job another time too, because you're inspiring in so many aspects. I do want to have one last question for you, which everyone gets is, what empowers you and what inspires you, Amanda?
So I think it's between two things, but
Mhm.
probably the number one thing that empowers me is because of my life experience being full of sudden loss. Like everyone I know who has ever died in my life has died completely unexpectedly, very suddenly. They were here one day, they weren't the next. And that to me is a life lesson, and there is no time to waste. I am not going, and this is probably not a good thing, but I'm not going to wait till retirement to take the trip. I'm not going to wait to make a memory. I live my life right now because I don't know how much longer I have. And that has been proven to me time and time and time again. And so that empowers me to do everything I'm doing because I want to make my mark while I'm here and I want to do these. I want to make my dreams come true. I don't want to put them all off for 20 years because I don't know that I have 20 years. And so that's like my number one thing that empowers me. And I would say a secondary thing is just the people that I surround myself with. My dad has been a huge support in everything I've done. My husband has been extremely supportive. And I have found pockets of friends in different things that I'm doing who see me and support me and lift me up, and I do the same for them. And so that has just been really, really crucial, especially for writing, just getting into a new space and finding people who are doing something similar and then being there for each other has been huge.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's true. I think you and I've learned from our parents' loss that life is short. And I think the best compliment people always told me about my dad was he was 71, but he lived so many infinite more years. And that to me is because you don't know. That's the one thing we all know. We don't know. You don't know when it's your time. And I love that because why should we wait? I don't want to retire when I'm 70. I just want to enjoy life. And as you said, do those trips and say yes to things when people invite you to do. And, so I love that and absolutely support it more than I can say. And I'm older than you. So I'm like, the time is, ticking by, but then you make every day the most you can and you get
Yeah,
up and you do something. And I love also your inspiration for exercising. I feel like that and hiking and seeing that's incredible. I love that piece as well because I think people discredit like it's body and mind and I'm like really I try to work out. I'm nothing like you, but I feel that doesn't when I take my dogs for a walk, I just love it. I come back with the mood different. So I think that's really important for others to don't forget, enjoy the beauty around you and it can help change your mood and get you, more positive for whatever's happening to you.
absolutely. And it can help. I think it can help relationship building too. I think spending time outdoors in nature, it just allows you time for silence as much as it allows you time for discussion and to have that balance there. And I think nature is highly underutilized in healing when it comes to grief or anything else you're facing in life. So
No,
very much needed.
I
Get out.
love that, Amanda. And I'm so honored to have you in my world. And I love your business and I will put a link to everyone. And I'm already have a few ideas of I'll be reaching out to purchase some things. And I'm so glad to know you and you're so inspiring and I'm so appreciative of you being on Her Stories today.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel the same way about you. And that's one of the best things about being in the space I'm in is meeting people and expanding my network of people who are like-minded and doing amazing things.
Thank you so much. And stay tuned for the next episode of Her Stories.